Hey, to my kindergarten art friends, welcome to your first art class. My name is Miss Tess and I will be your art teacher. I'm really excited to teach you art, and we're going to have a ton of fun even if we're making art from home. There's a lot that we can still do, and you have a great art supply packet to get you started, and I'll have some more stuff to send home to you very soon to help you with all of your art making. Today we're going to get started and just talk about what art is. Some of us probably already know some great examples of art, and maybe we've even been to the art museum in Cincinnati or in other cities. But some of us probably have not had as much exposure to art. So we're going to get started today talking a little bit about art. I have a book that I really enjoy, and I'm going to share some pages from my book throughout the quarter with you, and we'll use it to kind of start our conversation about what art is, and what makes art different, and who makes art, and what are the important pieces that we include within our art. A lot of what we'll talk about today, well, not just today, but throughout the quarter, are what we call the elements of art. And there are 7 elements of art, and we will talk about them through your entire art career at Parker Woods Montessori. Some of the main ones that we'll discuss are things like color, lines, shapes, and we'll talk about texture, we'll talk about form and space. So we'll talk about value. And so there's a lot to discuss, and we'll take it piece by piece, and then we'll talk about how you can incorporate that into your artwork. But to get started, we'll start with my book today. My book is called How Art Works, and it's by Sarah Hull. And the first section that we're going to share is called What is Art? Okay, so what is art? Art has meant different things at different times and to different people. Originally, it is simply meant something made by hand. Nowadays, it's mostly used for pictures, sculptures, and other objects created to be looked at. Art has been around for as long as there have been people. The earliest known works of art are rock paintings. There are famous cave paintings we'll look at later this year that have been found in France and other countries made long, long ago. Long ago, people believed that art had magical powers. 4,000 years ago, ancient Egyptians thought art could help someone live on after death. In fact, the ancient Egyptian word for a sculptor, that's somebody who's making some three-dimensional artwork, translates as he who keeps alive. This is a sculpture bust of Queen Nefertiti. Lots of art that followed that time was made for religious reasons. It would tell myths or stories from holy books to glorify gods and goddesses. So many artists that first got their starts were being paid by different church and religions to make the artwork, kind of like an illustrator for stories from the Bible or other myths that were tied to religious practices. By the 15th century, European artists were making portraits and painting scenes too. They were also getting better and better at making their pictures look real. And we'll look at some more examples of that later on as well. So we went from art being made for religious purposes to art starting to be made for everyday people. During the 19th and 20th centuries, new materials made art cheaper and easier. Artists also had more freedom to make pictures of whatever they liked. Some tried to capture simple everyday experiences, such as this one here by Edward Hopper. This was painted in 1929. It's called Chop Suey. And it's a picture of two women out having lunch together. Other artists began to experiment with radically new approaches to painting. They would use shapes and colors as things in their own right, rather than copying how things looked. So that's when we're going to talk about moving from art that's made to be as realistic as possible to art as an abstract idea. Ideas about art have been changing for as long as there have been artists, but in the last 100 years, this has been happening faster than ever. So we have one other important question for us to answer as we start our first art class today. And that question is, what is an artist? Today, people usually think of artists as people who are extremely creative and full of new ideas that they develop in their own way. But this wasn't always the case. In the past, artists were seen as skilled craftspeople. They made art in order for wealthy clients and often working together in workshops. So a painting like this one here, called Tobias and the Angel, would be the work of many people, not just one single artist. So the most important details would be painted by the workshop leader. But the simpler parts, such as the background, would be done by the assistants. Many workshops also had assistants who were responsible for mixing up the colors and setting up everything for the main artist to come in and work. Notice how Tobias and the Angel have similar left hands. Workshops often kept a set of drawings to copy, so the hands were probably copied from the same ones. You see how they look so similar? The status of artists began to change about 500 years ago. Art came to be understood as the act of a creative genius, and people started to see artists more as they do today. One of the most famous artists and one of the first artists to really achieve that celebrity status was Leonardo da Vinci. And this is a self-portrait of Leonardo da Vinci. So a self-portrait is a picture of a person. That's a portrait, but the self-portrait is a picture of yourself. So the person that you're drawing in your portrait is you. And this year in art class, you will definitely make a self-portrait. Many of the powerful rulers hired Leonardo da Vinci to make paintings and sculptures, even though he didn't always finish them, and his drawings were greatly admired. Leonardo drew whatever he liked. The animals on this page are all drawings of his, where he would just sit and sketch from observations. Today, artists tend to create something first and sell it later, which is much different from back in the day when artists would be paid to do something and then to complete it. If an artist is famous, that adds hugely to the value of their work. But not everything has changed. Many artists still employ assistants, especially to help with large works of art or technical processes such as printmaking. Before the 1500s, artists rarely signed their work as people didn't think their names were as important. So we got started and we talked a little bit about what art is. We also started talking about what an artist is. And each one of you is most definitely an artist. But you're just getting started. Just like everything you've ever learned to do in your life, art is going to require some practice. Nobody starts off making their artwork look perfect the first time, even when they have a lot of practice like me. I still will have things where I'm going to mess up, and I'm going to maybe use an eraser and try again, or I'm going to change my plan and keep working through my mistakes. And you're going to need to do the same thing. We're going to work together to practice our skills, because just like playing basketball, we have to practice dribbling and shooting before we get good at it. Just like walking, you weren't born immediately knowing how to walk. It took a lot of practice. It probably took a lot of falling down until you learned how to really get good at it. So art is going to be the same way. So it's important that we give ourselves the time and the space to know that it's okay to make mistakes and start over. And one of the best tools for doing that is always starting off your artwork with a pencil and an eraser. Because when we're just using a pencil, we can erase when we make a mistake. When we move on to our crayons or markers or oil pastels, that's when it's going to be more difficult we can't go back and erase that mistake. So in order to correct a mistake, sometimes it might mean sitting for a moment and rethinking our plan and seeing if we can incorporate our mistake into our artwork. Sometimes I find that when I do that, that place where maybe at first I thought it was a mistake ends up being my most favorite part of my artwork. So this quarter is going to be about experimenting with art, experimenting with our different art making materials. We call those medium. So we're going to work with crayons as a medium. We're going to work with markers as a medium. We're going to use pencil as a medium. We're also going to play around with oil pastels, which are one of my most favorite art making tools. And we're going to use scissors, glue, and paper as an art medium as well. And when you come into the art room, over the next few years, we'll learn how to make lots of other things. We'll do some weaving and basket making. There's a kiln in the art room, and so we'll learn how to make objects out of clay. But those can be pretty messy to get started at home. So we're going to start with some simple artwork, and we're really going to build our skills. So when we come back to the art room, we'll be ready to move on to those harder mediums. So for your first assignment today, I want you to get out your sketchbook, and I want you just to practice drawing on a few of your pages and sketching some ideas for pictures that you might like to draw later this year. They can be some of your favorite places that you'd like to go, some of your favorite people or things, or they can just be something from your imagination, or they can be characters from your favorite TV shows. We'll pull inspiration from everywhere in our own lives and in looking at the art of other people. But we'll find that inspiration for our art will come from everywhere. One last thing to discuss before we're finished with art class day number 1. If you were in my art room, we would have taken the time to go over the art room expectations. So those are the behaviors and the choices that we make when we meet together in the art room. Now, even though you're doing art at home, there are still some rules and expectations for how you're going to do your art at home. The first thing we should talk about are your supplies. It is very important that you take care of your supplies because there are no extras. That set that you have needs to last you for your whole first quarter of art class. That means you are responsible for taking good care of them, finding a safe spot for your art supplies to live so that younger siblings or pets don't get into your art supplies. You are responsible for coming to your lessons on time. I hope that at least at one point this quarter, you choose to join a live lesson. The live lesson should be a lot of fun because when we share the stories, like some of the stories I shared with you today, we'll have an opportunity to discuss those back and forth. I'll ask questions. You'll get to see the faces of other friends who are joining us. But when you do that, there's a few things that are really important. Number one is that you come to class on time. We'll be trying to get everyone together, and everyone shouldn't have to wait for you to come late. So once I start the lesson, I'm not going to be able to go back and repeat anything that you might have missed. So you might have to refer back to some of these recorded videos. So please come on time. When you join, you should be muted unless you have been called on to ask a question, to answer a question, or I have asked if there are any questions and you want to ask a question. But we should not be interrupting lessons, and we should wait until it is our turn to speak and we have been called on. Usually once we get to the work session portion, towards the end of each lesson, it would be okay for you to unmute and be able to talk a little bit with friends as you're working. And that's true for the rule in the art room. If we were in the art room meeting, it would be the same thing. You would come on time to class, you would have a seat, and you would be silent during the lesson portion, and you would only speak if you had raised your hand and were called on. But then once it's time to work, everyone is permitted to talk quietly at their tables. So if any friend is being loud, they're going to get a reminder, even on Google Meet, that they need to quiet down. It's important that unless you have something to say, that we stay on mute. We'll all be meeting from our homes and all be here at school. And when we're not talking, we should stay on mute, because even if we're not talking, we might have mom and dad or grandma or grandpa or aunts or uncles in the back on work calls. We might have other siblings in other rooms in our houses or sitting next to us that are on classes too. So it's important that we keep the background noise down so that everybody can hear the lesson portion and can hear other people when they have questions. All right, your materials, you should come to class prepared. I will always let you know on Schoology what you will need each day for your lesson. So it's important that you're logging into Schoology to see what you need to bring. So for tomorrow, you're going to want to bring your paper with your name on it. You're going to bring a pencil and an eraser. You're going to bring your crayons, and you're going to bring your color handouts. It says Color Math the Magic. You can see I started coloring mine in. You're going to color this with me tomorrow, so don't color yours in yet, and we'll work on this tomorrow together. So check Schoology before each lesson to make sure that you come prepared with your materials so that you're not scrambling to get those as lesson is already beginning. You will find all of your lessons and all of your work in Schoology, so it's important that you're logging in at least once a week to Schoology to check to see your work. You will also see in Schoology that there are attendance quizzes. They just ask you a simple question and you need to answer the question. Usually it's a yes or no, and that's one way that it's going to track whether or not you are in school. So if you're attending your art classes and that you're engaging with the material. So make sure that you're logging into the attendance quizzes as well. Everything will be posted within each folder that you need. Cleaning up will be extra important. In the art room, we work together as a group to clean up so that the next class that comes in is ready to go. It's important at home that you are responsible for your materials. It is not the job of the adult in your house to come and clean up your crayons or your markers after you have finished your work. That will be your responsibility, just as if we're in the art room, it's your responsibility to clean up your room or your workspace. So I expect that it is something that you are doing at the end. So if you have made a big mess, that is your mess to clean up. Make sure that if we're doing a collage, that any large scraps of paper you're putting back into your folder to save, because we'll probably have multiple lessons where we'll want to use some cut paper. And even some of the smaller pieces might be great shapes to save for a paper collage. You need to make sure that the lids are on your markers tightly so that they don't dry out. That's a big problem in the art room. And since you're sharing materials in the art room, usually if you have not been very good with the materials, there are still materials to replace that. But that is not true at home. So I won't have another red marker to send you if you forgot to put the cap on. And you're going to need the red marker to complete your artwork. Please do not work ahead on the paper. I have sent you enough paper to get you through every project, with 1 or 2 to possibly spare. But if you make a mistake, it's important that you are working to erase the mistakes, or to work through, or to figure out how you might maybe flip the paper over and work on the other side, but some creative problem solving, because I will not have extra paper to give you. And some of the paper that's in there is specific for projects. So make sure you're utilizing the correct materials. All right, end of day 1. Few things to remember as we look forward to day number 2 of art class. You have your first assignment, and that is to start thinking like an artist. We talked a little about what art is. We talked about what an artist is, and you are an artist. So you are going to start off with your sketchbook, and you're going to start to sketch a couple ideas. So where might you find some inspiration for art this year? Think about some of your favorite things and start drawing pictures of them. They can be pets at your house. They can be portraits of people in your life that you care about. They can be illustrations of some of your favorite book or TV show characters. They can be crazy imaginative monsters or weird ideas that you have from that crazy imagination in your brain. So I want you to draw me 3 or 4 different ideas in your sketchbook. And you're going to draw that with a pencil, and you're going to draw on both sides. We're going to want to fill that sketchbook with lots of different ideas, so don't get too far ahead. We'll need that space this quarter. But use the first 2 pages on front and back to draw 3 or 4 ideas you might have for art for this year. And then for day 2, tomorrow, let's review what you need to bring to be ready for your lesson. You're going to need your sketchbook, because we might have a time to do a little show and tell, to share some of our ideas with our friends. Then you're going to bring your paper with your name on it. You're going to bring your Color Math Magic packet, the 2 pages. You're going to bring your crayons, and you're going to bring a pencil with an eraser. And that will help us to be ready. And remember, if you're going to join the live lesson, to be on time, and you can find that link in the folder marked week 1. So click through, and hopefully I'll see you in person tomorrow. If not, check back for video number 2 to learn the lesson and the assignment that you will continue to complete this week. And it's art that has to use your name. I'm glad you joined me for day 1. I can't wait for day 2.